Coming up in today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, stock up, stock down after a 34-31 overtime win over the Washington Commanders.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers for making us your first listen Monday through Friday. This Tuesday edition of the show is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. Gino, time for stock up, stock down, and another up and down win for sure, but I would say there were definitely more positives in this game than negatives.
I really liked the film from this team.
Yeah, the
especially
more you watch
offense.
the game, it looks better and better.
Defensively, I think Washington just did a great job. I mean, they replicated their formula from that upset last year, Lou. They held the ball for over 7 minutes on that first drive. I thought they did an excellent job making Philadelphia be super efficient.
Yeah.
But when your offense is clicking on all cylinders like they happen to be this last game, and the craziest part, Lou, is that they're still not ultra efficient in the red zone. It's like when they get to that next evolution of what their offense can be and hopefully replicate, I would say even 75% of the success that Shane Steichen had calling plays in the red zone. I have a question for you, Lou, and this came up in my head during the game. If you were Nick Sirianni and you've been in Brian Johnson's shoes before, and it's like he gave up play calling, 7 games into his tenure as the Eagles head coach? Not saying Brian should give up play calling, but do you give like the 2-minute drill or like the red zone offense
Potentially like to somebody with Doug?
Yes, to somebody else on that offense and maybe just try and change up your luck, because he's good between the 20s and then it's like you get to the red zone and something just turns off for him.
Well, you know what's the frustrating part is, I actually thought the first few red zone drives, I actually liked what he was doing. He was finally using pre-snap motion, and you've got to do that in such tight spaces like that. You can't just go based on execution and talent. Scheme really gets more and more important the closer to the end zone you get, which is, seems like an obvious statement. So, but yeah, it got worse and worse as the game went on, and we're going to talk about that with our stock down segment, but maybe that is something to consider. Maybe Nick Sirianni gets more involved. I'm not really sure. I mean, Jeff Stoutland's a part of it as well with the run game, so it's definitely a collective effort, but that's definitely something that has to improve. And the good thing is they still put up 34 points in spite of that, and a lot of that was on the backs of their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, and we talked a lot about him on the post-game show yesterday, but man, I'm still in awe, and as you mentioned, the tape gets better and better. The different angles of some of those Jalen Hurts completions, just unbelievable. I mean, the 3rd and 8 to OZ in the fourth quarter, the Dallas Goedert throw over the middle, the 2 sideline catches to A.J. Brown in the honey hole, the touchdown pass and the one before that. I mean, if you would have showed me 2 years ago some of the completions Jalen has made over these last 2 years, I would have never believed you.
That throw to Dallas Goedert just doesn't seem real.
And it's like the 5th or 6th completion that people are highlighting because there were so many other good ones.
And the one to OZ where that linebacker is literally stretched as far as
like
he
that
can
ball had
be.
to be there right when he threw it. Like
And
no margin, 0.1 or 2 seconds later, it's batted down.
He's like those guys that are the professional dart players. I don't know how they're so good, but when they get those 9 darters where they get 501 points on 9 darts, that's how he was throwing the ball, man.
That's
it was
like
bullseye,
yeah.
bullseye, bullseye. And the thing is, when Brian Johnson and him start to click, especially in the red area, that's where it's going to be lethal. Like why I dislike running in those areas, Lou, especially stretch type of runs. Well, 1, it starts behind the line of scrimmage, and you know how much I hate that when you're in field goal range. And 2, you're taking that out of Jalen Hurts' hand inside the pocket where he's effectively the most efficient.
Ironically, considering Jalen's past, he's been better inside the pocket than outside the pocket, and that normally was not the case.
No, I want him to sit there, go through his read, and why can't he do what he did between the 20s where he's finding the open target, like that ball to OZ? Why can't you do that against zone and just sit somebody in the end zone, Dallas Goedert, and just put the ball in his hand? that's the thing, that Jalen is playing exceptionally well, especially in the last game and a half, I would say, Lou.
Yes.
And he's only going to get better because the accuracy there is there. The arm strength, which, how did we ever have questions about his arm strength coming out of college? Because he can sling that thing. I mean, he's not as good as Justin Herbert. Justin's a freak, right? But he's right there, dude.
Yeah, it's not generational arm strength, but I definitely think I overlooked how strong it was. I thought he had like a C+ arm. Definitely has at least I would say a B+. I mean, there are some throws. Again, that OZ
got
throw.
An A. I mean, he's got the
third
longest completed air distance throw on the season.
Yeah, Gino, it doesn't matter if he doesn't have a Justin Herbert arm, but it does not matter. He honestly reminds me a lot right now of prime Russell Wilson when it comes to his deep ball passing. Right now in the NFL, he has
analogy.
Just because, like, again, does he have an A+ generational arm? No, but the timing, the accuracy, the touch on these throws, it's all, and again, he has arm strength too to get the ball there. So yeah, it reminds me of Russell Wilson where it just, every single one is a rainbow. And that's the thing, is the intermediate and short passing, I think, wasn't there for 2.5 games. You saw that come to fruition against Tampa the more the game went on, against Washington. The deep ball, though, it's been there all year. He has the most completions and touchdowns on throwing attempts of 25+ air yards. He also has a 103 rating in that way. He, right now, is one of, if not the best deep ball passers in the league, and that continued on against Washington.
Somebody in our YouTube comments said, good teams are just going to take the deep ball away from Jalen Hurts. It's like, what? It's like, if the guys win downfield, he's going to push the ball downfield. Yeah, they've tried to take that away, and they, at least once every game, Lou, they're going to hit you for an explosive play. And that's when they have to capitalize. And when they can compile those explosive plays, because you're worried about defending the run, you're worried about DeAndre Swift and Jalen Hurts, and then you let things behind you like Washington did. Not every team has as impressive of a defensive coordinator and can disguise things like Bill Belichick on a whole offseason of planning for this game. And even Brian Flores sent you some just different looks. And last week against Tampa, you're going against Todd Bowles, but you saw this week when Jack Del Rio, who you've had his number forever, when he gets clicking, it's a different level of player. And he sees things exceptionally well. And he doesn't have the Josh Allen or like the Anthony Richardson type of arm, but he understands the timing, the touch, and the placement more than anything. Where he's locating these balls on the receivers, that's the thing that you just can't teach that. You can't teach how to throw a ball like that.
Gino, the thing is, too, is you can try to take the deep ball away, but you can't cover every single part of the field, even down the field, with two safeties or however you do it. I mean, you saw this game, you had the explosive plays along the left sideline to A.J. Brown. You had the one over the middle to DeVonta Smith. Heck, they're using DeAndre Swift a little more these last few weeks on wheel routes. Kenneth Gainwell, actually, too. Hurts went down the field on the right sideline to Kenny G last week, as much as that's not the guy I want getting that target. They're using the explosive area of the passing game in many different spots on the field, and that's what's leading to success, but also just they're so talented that sometimes that trumps what the scheme is doing on defense. Gino, before we head into stock up from some other players on this roster, I want to get your thoughts on this mobility thing, though, with Jalen, because he is right now in scramble rate 26th in EPA per scramble, and that last year he was actually in the top 5, of course. But that one late run in the fourth quarter where he evades 2 should-be sacks to get the first down showed me that it's almost like it's calculated. It's on purpose. He's holding back to stay healthy. The coaches as well are probably informing him to do this because they can still win right now without him going totally over the top when it comes to like yards after contact. But at first I was wondering, like, is he not healthy? He doesn't look as explosive. But honestly, I think he's just holding back until the games matter more down the stretch and in the postseason, which, again, it's hurting your offense a little bit short term, but I think it's the best move for the long term.
Can't have your cake and eat it too, folks. Like, yeah, we want to see Jalen run the football, but we can't complain that he gets hurt because he's running the football when he
with
is
his style too, you know.
Of course. And when he has to make guys miss, it's evident that he can still do that. And it's out of necessity. That's what we've been preaching, that he needs to do it when necessary. And it seemed like he did that. He didn't take unnecessary contact. And I would love to see him just live to fight another down. And he's made some very smart decisions this year. Just towards the end of the game, just throwing the ball away when you don't need to just put it up there in unnecessary areas.
There are some, though, I'd like to see. Like, there was one play where he only had a nickel corner to beat along the sidelines. There, when you have like 20 pounds on the guy, I would like to see him, not like when you're running through the A gap and there's two linebackers ready to hit you. That's when you get down. But there was one play where he slid after a 2-yard gain. I'm like, that could have been a 15-yarder last year.
I'm fine with it, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, you see all of these guys getting concussed in just like freak ways. Like, look at Jamal Adams, the first
look at the
game
Bengals,
he
man. Their
plays.
seasons, it feels like it's over because Joe Burrow's hurt.
Right, and you need the quarterback on the field.
Yeah,
and
you have to,
Jalen Hurts
obviously.
inside the pocket is as efficient as ever, so I'm good with that.
For sure. Got to say, too, Gino, like from a team perspective in general, it's been up and down this year, but for the Eagles to be 4-0 after everything they've gone through this offseason, they're the first Super Bowl team that lost the Super Bowl to go 4-0 the next year since the 1998 Packers. I mean, what Jalen and this team is overcoming is pretty incredible. It's very hard to sustain success after a Super Bowl run with a rookie quarterback on that deal, all the free agents that leave, the coordinators that get promoted elsewhere. It's hard.
I think it just has to do with who you have at quarterback and allowing this culture to flourish, like with the leadership that you have, young or old. If you buy in, you're going to be on this team. And I think even guys down to like Olamide Zaccheaus, man, like that block he had on the A.J. Brown touchdown, that's the type of guys you want in this locker room. And that's the type of guys you have in this locker room because you've seen the toxic environments and what it could do to Philadelphia. I mean, as recent as Carson Wentz and the end of Doug Peterson's tenure. But when they have an efficient culture and just the guys in place, they just seem to play well, and they're a good football team, and they should be discussed with one of the better franchises in football. They're 4-0 right now. Like, why is there always a talking point that the Philadelphia Eagles aren't good because or but why? Like, there's no buts. Like, they're good. They're a good football team, folks. Accept it.
Yeah. I think them actually struggling a little bit in certain areas and still being 4-0 is more proof that they're a good football team because they can still get these wins in spite of that. So we'll get into stock up more coming up next. A lot of other guys shined against Washington, but first, shout out to one of our sponsors. It's the Game Time app. Game Time is the best way to get tickets last minute, or if you're planning something down the road, you don't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. They're fast and easy to get tickets for everything you need. Sports, music, comedy, even theater events with killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. See the view from your seat before you buy it, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Got my Eagles-Bills tickets through Game Time. Went to a comedy show the other day in Rochester. Great, thanks to Game Time. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. And even hour after it starts, you can still get tickets on everything again. Football, basketball, baseball, concerts, you name it. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We know how expensive tickets can be. $20 off when you use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. It's a Tuesday edition of the show. Stock up, stock down after a 34-31 win over the Washington Commanders. Stock up for Jalen Hurts, Gino, as we mentioned, but how about his wide receiver 1A, 1B with DeVonta Smith, however you want to label it, A.J. Brown. Just another incredible performance. This guy, the tear he's on these last 2 weeks, 19 receptions for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns. I can't believe he's as good, if not better than 2022, but because that's one of the best individual receiver seasons we've ever seen with this franchise. AJ looks better than he did last year.
There's been a couple times in the history of the Eagles where they've had a guy that it's like, oh, this guy is clearly going to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
yes,
you can go back to the 80s and 90s. I think we know the two. Mike Quick, Harold Carmichael. Like, these guys are big, strong, fast, can catch everything, can beat anybody one-on-one. Just great receivers. And then you turn around and Terrell Owens is there in 2004. And I would even say when you see just glimpses of prime Deshaun Jackson, who should be a Hall of Famer, and now with A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, you have to think the exact same thing. I mean, these guys can win against anybody. They are beating, it doesn't matter. Big cornerbacks, smaller cornerbacks, better in quick twitch areas, better at 50-50 balls. They're just better than all of those guys. I mean, the one play from 2 years ago when DeVonta was a rookie over Pat Surtain, I mean,
Right.
that solidified how good that guy was in the air, and he just continues to do it over and over and over again. And A.J. Brown, how do you defend Dennis Rodman with shoulder pads on? Because that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. The guy is too big. He's too strong. His hands are just way bigger than everybody's, and he's going to catch everything. You try to tackle him, Emmanuel Forbes, good luck. You're 168 pounds. You could put it in the open field for him and let him run. He had a Shady McCoy-esque type of run last week. Or you just put it up in the end zone for him, and he's going to come down with everything. And these two guys, if they could keep them together for the next 6 to 7 years.
It's got to be a priority, man.
You can't let the
lose
sins of the past, where Deshaun and Jeremy Maclin, when you had arguably the best duo since the 80s and 90s, slip out of your hands. You can't let that happen again if you're Howard.
And these two are even better. I'm telling you, I think by the end of their careers in Philadelphia, you're going to be able to make the argument for both Brown and Smith being the greatest receiver in franchise history. I mean, Gino, just listen to this
keep
too.
him here, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Through Eagles history, the most receptions through 4 games. Terrell Owens had 32 in 2005. Zach Ertz, tight end, 2018 at 31. Incredible. A.J. Brown, 29 so far this year. Most receiving yards through 4 games. T.O. had 506 in 2005. Mike Quick had 473. Harold Jackson, 455. Fred Barnett, 421. A.J. Brown right there in the top 5, 414 so far through 4 games this year. I mean, what he's doing, and it's kind of overshadowing what DeVonta Smith is doing, and he's been incredible too. 7 for 78 on Sunday against Washington. Another vintage Moss play. I mean, these two, again, they're going to be some of the greatest this team has ever seen, if not the 2 greatest.
We come so far from 2020 where not a single wide receiver had 500 yards. And we're talking
ridiculous.
about A. Brown being like 2 quarters away from eclipsing that number, and DeVonta Smith being right behind him, man. And one of the things that I continue to think about, Lou, is being the Philadelphia Eagles right now. Like, I want to focus on this season, but in the future, right? Like, let's say with the 10 picks you have next year, would you think about even adding another? Like, you see Seattle, how good their trio is, and you see Washington, who you played last week, and it's like, dude, what if they add somebody else to that group? Like, that's how scary it can be. And even if Dallas Goedert isn't playing as good, he's going to take one of the bigger matchups away, take a safety out of the equation, and let those 2 guys cook, which they have been, man. And it's not just like a Travis Fulgham, like flash in the pan. It's these guys are really good football players.
That's again, last year, A.J. Brown had the most single receiving yards in a season an Eagles ever had. And so this year, I actually think he's been better, which is ridiculous to say he can top what he did last year through a month, but that's exactly what's happening. So stock up to A.J. Brown. Got to say DeVonta Smith, too. Made some big plays. That deep ball, the huge contested catch, that puts you back in range for a field goal to get within 1 score before halftime. That 9-yard catch set up the Jake Elliott field goal in overtime on a 3rd down after the intentional grounding weird penalty. So both receivers stepped up in a huge way. I think on defense, not a lot of guys stepped up, but the entire defensive line did, right? I mean, this was the best game of the year so far for Brandon Graham. Fletcher Cox was dominating his one-on-ones. It sucks he didn't get a sack because he deserved it. Josh Sweat had a career-high 9 pressures and a sack. Jalen Carter had 6 pressures. Hassan Reddick had 7 and a sack. I mean, the front 4, they had a tough job because Howell was getting the ball out quick, but they continue to dominate this year.
One of my favorite statistics that Next Gen Stats puts out is the average separation from the quarterback for a defensive pass rusher.
I love that stat, yeah.
The league average is 4.56 yards. Listen to the entire top 4 of the Eagles. Fletcher Cox was at 4.09 yards. Hassan Reddick at 3.77 yards. Milton Williams at 3.45 yards. And Josh Sweat at 3.25 yards. Josh Sweat was essentially a yard and a quarter closer to the quarterback than anybody else in the National Football League. And it's because they have explosion in their lower half. Like, when they are scouting guys, if you can't get off the football, you're not going to be a pass rusher in Philadelphia. And all of those guys just win their matchups. They're unbelievable. And they don't even have the guys covering behind them. And if you look at what Daniel Jones experienced last night with Seattle's defensive line, sacking him 11 times, good luck to Evan Neal and company in a couple months from now when you have to play the Giants twice. These guys are going to get those numbers, and we might be talking about them being just as good, if not better, than 2022. And it's crazy to say, but through a quarter of the season, they're really good, man. They're just getting to the quarterback.
And the sacks were finally there, 5 on the day. You had 1 from Reddick, 1 from Sweat. You should have honestly had 2 from Jalen Carter, who had another great game, 6 pressures. By the way, he has at least 4 pressures in every game, according to Next Gen Stats. He leads all defensive tackles still in pressures, win rate, and get off per snap, which is just unbelievable. Still the lead for Defensive Rookie of the Year. 3 of those sacks, though, Gino, came from Nicholas Morrow, stock up to one of the Eagles starting linebackers that wasn't even on the team a month ago, then was on the practice squad. 11 tackles, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble on Sunday. He's PFF's right now through 4 games, the second highest rated inside linebacker, only behind Roquan Smith. Has Howie Roseman kind of hit his groove with signing linebackers the last 2 years? Because he used to be terrible at it. And the last 2 years, the value signings of Kazir White, I mean, you had TJ Edwards already there, Zach Cunningham this year, Nicholas Morrow. He's kind of in his groove right now.
That's a good way to say he could get lucky sometimes too, because we saw in the past that,
and he also cut Morrow, if we're being honest.
Yeah, we do have to give him credit though, because I mean, he saw what he had and he's like, I'm not going to sit here and let that stand, right? Like even seeing Christian Ellis that first game, which why he ever took snaps and was the green dot signal caller.
Yeah.
And Nicholas Morrow wasn't even on the roster that game. That's crazy.
Which was confusing to me, Gino, because me and you on the show a lot during the preseason said we thought Morrow looked good.
Yeah, he looked quick, and he honestly reminded me, of LJ Fort's preseason, where it's like, oh, he's getting to the sideline pretty quickly, and it's like you can see that he can play from the hash to the sideline. Like that's what you needed.
He's good at coming downhill. He's a good blitzer. They're using him the way to his strengths, and you can't expect him to be a 3-down guy who's in coverage against a Terry McLaurin in zone. But I mean, he's good at getting downhill.
And you can make it work with Zach Cunningham until Nakobe Dean comes back. And Zach Cunningham is playing really good football too. I think both of those guys got to get their credit. They're bailing the Eagles out in some big spots, especially when that secondary behind them hasn't been as good as advertised.
No, I agree. So definitely stock up to Nicholas Morrow. It was overall, I think there was a lot of positives, the more you go back and watch this game. Anybody else for you that shined?
I think just the whole offensive line, you just have to give them credit. Like, it's so easy to take it for granted, but then you watch other games and see quarterbacks just like
that's a tough matchup, by the way.
Running for their life, man. And especially against Washington, that's difficult to keep those guys. Those are 4 elite guys. As much as I disliked Montez Sweat coming out of Mississippi State, dude, they're talking about signing him over Chase Young, which is insane. Yeah, he is right now. And Payne and Allen might be the best interior duo in the league. And that's saying something when the Eagles aren't really that good. Yeah, I would say they're the best, dude. They're really good football players.
Yeah, for sure. The offensive line stood tall. They lost Cam Jurgens, too, who was playing extremely well. He's going to be out, it looks like, by the way, a few weeks, so it's going to be Sua Opeta at right guard. But I think Sua held his own, too. I mean, in pass pro, he struggled a little bit. But on the ground, they got going. And I think that's the key when you get and Jeff Stoutland knows this more than anybody. When you get a backup offensive lineman in there, the way to get him going, get that ground game going.
And Sua Opeta, they didn't shy away from running to him. Literally the first run that he was in the game, they went to his side on a combo block with the center. And I think you just have to trust your players and the next man up. It's worked in some places and others, they're still trying to figure it out.
Stock down coming up next. Who struggled in this game? And there were some for sure. It's why they barely squeaked this one out. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
Before we finish up today's episode of LOE, we have a message from our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, and everybody here at LOE. Right now, to all new customers, if you haven't bet with them yet, what are you doing? But you can get in on the action right now and get $200 in bonus bets when you put down not $10, but $5. As little as $5. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets. What does that mean? You put in $5, you're going to have $205 to wager on spreads, player props, over, unders, and more. And all you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Visit FanDuel.com and include any money lines, props, and anything else that you want to bet on for your team. You can get in on the action. FanDuel, I've been with them for the longest of any sports book. And trust me, I've been responsibly gambling now for almost 15 years. FanDuel is the best. Make sure you bet with them today.
All right, Gino, let's get into stock down after a 34-31 win over Washington. barely squeaked this one out, took overtime to beat an inferior team. Again, the Commanders are good, though, for sure. Got to give them credit. A lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but I think there were, again, issues where the Eagles kind of shot themselves in the foot. They were also, stuck down to the refs. They were overcoming a lot of ridiculous penalties, but at the same time, like you look at coaching, I think it was stocked down to Nick Sirianni, Sean Desai, and Brian Johnson. You were talking about the red zone play calling earlier. It was frustrating because, and I mentioned this on the postgame show, I texted you that I thought he was having a great game plan through the first quarter and a half, even in the red zone, a lot more pre-snap motion, but it was just getting worse and worse, and I think that came to fruition. That red zone drill, or that final drive, or one of the final drives in the fourth quarter, the Kenneth Gainwell run, specifically on 3rd and 11, a lot of head-scratching decisions. Same with Desai with the soft coverage in certain spots. Nick Sirianni, not taking the one penalty, or taking it instead of a 4th and 1. Just not a great day from the coaches, I feel like.
Red zone offense is just continuing to be bad. They're still tied for 24th in the National Football League.
Yeah, with this talent, that's inexcusable, man. I mean,
with Las Vegas, Carolina, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans behind them. Good thing Dallas is as bad as they are, but it's inexcusable for having this good of a team, having as much success as you have had with
and as balanced
arguably the same personnel that you've had in the last 2 years and the same quarterback. It's on your OC to figure it out. And Sean Desai, worst game we've seen, but it's 4 games for him. I mean, give him the benefit of the doubt for both of the guys, but Sean put together 3 really good performances.
He did, yeah.
Brian, he's still got to figure it out. He's still got to put together a full game where we can see what this offense can be. You have to know what your limitations are. And I don't think you're figuring that out by shooting yourself in the foot, doing some things in situational looks that are just uncharacteristic of your offense, running in 2nd and 10 and 3rd and 11, insane in the red zone. I just don't get it. And they'll get there. They'll get there. We just got to remember the sky isn't falling, but it wasn't a good game by the entire coaching staff. And it starts with Nick Sirianni, man. Like, he has to hold his group accountable and he has to hold himself accountable. And I think he understands that. And I find it funny that his brother always calls him and holds him in check afterwards. It's like, yeah, if you want to know what's real, talk to a Western New York Italian. Like, they'll tell you how it is. And his brother, and I'm sure his dad, give him all the crap for those bad situational football timeouts and not taking that penalty.
Right. And again, as you mentioned, Desai, I was really happy with the first 3 games. So the sky is definitely not falling with him. I'm not as concerned as, with Jonathan Gannon. From the jump, I'm like, oh, we have a problem here with this scheme. But I do think with Johnson, it's frustrating too, because there are times in each game I'm like, oh, he's in a rhythm right now. A lot of what they're doing makes perfect sense. And then there's always, it seems like, I never had this issue with Shane Steichen through 2 years, but there's at least a couple times each game, where you're like, where is the logic in that play call? And not everything's going to work, but,
The first 15 plays are great. Like, when they script them up, they've done pretty well on their opening drives and having success in their first 2 possessions, I would say. But after that, he's good between the 20s, as I say. But once he gets to that red zone, it just, something clicks off. And like I said, to intro the show, like, does Nick take on that responsibility? Does he assign that to somebody else? I mean, that's big. I mean, that's not a little area of the field. Like, red zone, you're going to say, is probably 80% of what you have to do in the National Football League. Like, everything else besides that, like, there's so many variables that can go different, like when it comes to field position. But the one thing that is consistent, if you can't score in the National Football League, you're not going to win games. And look at those teams that I listed behind them. The Eagles and Dallas obviously are the odd teams out in that equation, that they're still winning football games in spite of not being able to score in the red zone. And the frustrating part is seeing Shane Steichen have so much success. And it's like, again, Indianapolis takes our play caller.
And they looked good in the red zone, the Colts. I mean, each week you're seeing some ridiculous play calls from Steichen. They've done it twice in a row. That's actually a good point, taking Frank Reich. Gino, I think stock down to the secondary. And it was not a great game for Darius Slay or James Bradbury, but I think this is more of a long-term concern. It's, man, what are they going to do with that slot spot and that second safety position? Sidney Brown, I think, can be one of the replacements, whether he's your slot corner or he's that safety that replaces Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans, because those two can't be the answer. But Sidney Brown can't have both spots. And I don't know if you're going to trade for somebody. Maybe this is up to Howie. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think Bradbury's got to be back on the boundary. And this schedule is getting harder and harder with star quarterbacks and good passing offenses. So, it's not an easy fix, but Washington kind of exposed for sure some of these issues.
What they're doing now, it's not going to work. And I think you have to separate Reed Blankenship out of that whole equation. Like,
Yeah, he's
he's
been great.
clearly the best guy back there.
Right.
But what they're doing is leaving them susceptible to having offensive coordinators understanding where the weakness is. And you just have to chip away all game until that really hits home. And when Darius Slay isn't playing as good as he should be, and James Bradbury was not as good as you would want him to be, you have a weak point in Josh Jobe, and I think they exposed that. I think you have to make some sort of move. I mean, unless Sidney Brown comes back and is truly an epiphany there, I think he is the best guy suited for the job, but is he going to be the only option you have? I mean, you want him to play safety.
On the roster, yeah.
On the roster, that's what I'm saying. Like, you want him to play safety, though. Like, you have to allow him to play his natural position. You can't just keep him in the slot. Look at CGJ. Like, when you took him out of the safety look, that really took away half of what he could do for you.
Long term, you want Sidney Brown at safety, but I will say when last year they kept CGJ deep and had Josiah Scott in the slot, that wasn't the move. And then they brought Gardner Johnson down, and it got better for the short term. So I think short-term solution, it probably is Sidney Brown until you trade for somebody or until you get to next year, because you want Brown long-term to be a safety that's playing deep. But that might be the quick fix. It's just, I think that's a better combination of Bradbury on the outside with Brown inside than Jobe on the outside and Bradbury on the inside.
Agreed. You got to do something, though, because it's early on right now. I mean, you're going to see a very good offense next week against the Rams with, I mean, two guys right now in Puka and Tutu that are just crushing it because they're getting
crazy. That's a good receiving duo, but it is.
Sean McVay, man, he'll take advantage of those weak points for you. So you have to do something quickly on this week where you might look down at the Rams, but you can't. Like, you can't overlook any team. Every team has played you tight this season. You have to come into this game and know that they're going to take advantage of that secondary. And Sean Desai wins and lessons. Learn from the mistakes of last week.
And again, they're probably going to play the best quarterback they've played all year in Matt Stafford. Not that they shouldn't have took Nolan Smith, Gino, but it is tough watching Brian Branch play so well in Detroit. I'm thinking, man, would that be the perfect player for the secondary right now?
Yeah, probably. But hey, I like Nolan. I think he's playing well.
Yeah.
They don't take safeties high, and they probably never will. But Sidney Brown, when he comes back. But that's when they run
into these issues, man. I mean, this is,
Sidney Brown, when he comes back, he's going to get the job, which is great for us. Great for the brand. Great for Canada.
I'm confident in Sidney Brown for sure. So they just got to get him back healthy, and hopefully that'll be against the Rams this week. We're going to look towards that matchup tomorrow on the show. We've got 3 more podcasts for you right here on Locked On Eagles all week long. Thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.